The Dinosaur Renaissance. This period of time for paleontology, which started in the 1960s, was one of the most important periods in scientific history. It was started by the discovery of a large raptor or dromaeosaurid from North America by Ostrom in 1964. That large raptor was of course Deinonychus, and it showed that dinosaurs were not the sluggish, dumb creatures as previously depicted. In fact, Deinonychus would have likely been a quick, agile, and very intelligent hunter. Throughout this period, many ideas of dinosaurs that we know today to be true were brought up, such as theropods standing horizontally instead of dragging their tail, or maybe Backer's idea about how dinosaurs as a whole were warm-blooded. However, arguably one of the most important breakthroughs from this renaissance would not come until the late 70s. This fossil find, or finds rather, would come from a little rock shop in Montana, and would go on to change how we view dinosaurs forever. Hello friends, my name is Connor, and welcome back again to the Paleopage. In honor of today being Mother's Day, sit back, relax, maybe watch with your mom, because today we are going to be uncovering the story of the good mother lizard. Funnily enough, the story of the good mother lizard starts out with a mother of the human variety. This is Marion Brandvold, the owner of a small rock shop in the middle of essentially nowhere, known as Bynum, Montana. The Trexagate shop was first opened by her first husband, Clifford Trexler, aka Trex, in 1937. The shop was taken up by Marion in the 60s when she found her new husband, John Brandvold. She was also the mother of two sons, Cliff and David Trexler. These two boys grew up surrounded by rocks, fossils, and paleontology. I mean, to be fair, there isn't really much more to do in Montana than go out and play with cool rocks. But this was especially the case for these two boys since their parents of course owned a rock shop. The family would often go out to prospect for fossils in order to keep up fresh stock. However, in the summer of 1977, Marion was out searching for new items for the shop when she discovered something different. They were fossils, limb bones, and pieces of rib. However, these fossils were tiny. Likely perplexed by these tiny fossils, Marion took as many of the bones as she could find and brought them back to her shop as well as her house. From there, the family spent the next almost year trying to accumulate as many bones as possible. But then, in the summer of the following year, the rock shop would be paid a visit that would go on to rewrite paleontological history. In 1978, the Trexagate shop was visited by two up-and-coming names within the paleontological field. The first of these visitors was Rudyard High School teacher Bob McKellar, and the other man was at the time the preparator at Princeton, none other than everyone's least favorite paleontologist, Jack Horner. This Jack Horner. Anyways, I'm gonna throw this disclaimer in here right now so I don't get in trouble later when I release the video. This story kind of has a lot to do with Jack Horner. However, Jack Horner is indeed a very weird dude. Not only is he controversial for his scientific ideas, such as T-Rex being mainly a scavenger or his Chickenosaurus project, but he's arguably worse in the fact that he's, a pedophile who is recently revealed to be in the Epstein files. Now, while I have to give him a little bit of credit in this story since he's kind of a central figure, that doesn't mean I like him in the slightest. I believe he's disgusting and scum and should be banished from all paleontological spaces and discussions from now on. Shout out DinoCon UK. Now with that out of the way, back to the story. In 78, these two men stumbled into the rock shop via the recommendation of another paleontologist of the time, Bob Clemens. When there, it was noted by Horner that they had been looking for fossils of baby dinosaurs. However, after identifying every vertebrate fossil that the Trexagate shop had to offer, they were about to leave when Marion pulled them aside and showed them two small gray bones. Almost immediately, McKellar and Horner identified these bones as belonging to a hadrosaurid of some sort. However, they were again just so small. These two bones immediately caught the two men by interest, prompting them to ask if Miss Brandvold had more. And more she did have. She took the two men to her home and pulled out a coffee container filled with these small hadrosaur bones. It's noted that when all laid out, Marion and her family had uncovered the remains of 4 tiny individuals. Shortly after, Horner and McKellar were taken by Brandvold to the original site where the bones were found. And when they got there and began excavation, they uncovered something much larger. They found a sort of bowl-shaped depression in the earth, filled with the remains of multiple more baby dinosaurs. The following year of 1979, the paleontologists returned to the site and found something even bigger. Instead of just uncovering one nest, they uncovered multiple nests. What they had found was the remains of an Upper Cretaceous dinosaur nesting ground. That same year, in July, one of the volunteer crew members of the name Fran Tannenbaum made an equally massive discovery while processing fossils along a seismic line that was laid out by an oil drilling company. Along this line, she had found the first ever dinosaur egg from North America, coming likely from the same dinosaur as the babies in the nesting grounds. This discovery gave the site the name Egg Mountain. Oh, and the oil company, funnily enough, was Shell. The final discovery of 1979 was made by Lori Trexler, the wife of Brandvold's son David Trexler, and she had found a fully intact skull of the animal responsible for laying the eggs and hatching the babies. This skull was part of a massive dinosaur bone bed, which would go on to produce thousands of fossils of hundreds of these hadrosaurs for the next 3 decades. Horner and McKellar used this skull as well as the baby specimens to finally describe the hadrosaur that same year of 1979. Ladies and gentlemen and moms alike, I would like to introduce you to the good mother lizard, Maiasaura peoplesorum. Maiasaura is an incredible animal. Not only is it notable for its role in the dinosaur renaissance, but it's also now one of the most well-known animals in the fossil record, with over 200 specimens having been found since 1977 of various age ranges. But before we talk about Maiasaura itself, we have to first understand the environment it called home. Maiasaura was native to the site known as Egg Mountain. Now, technically, Egg Mountain only refers to the specific hill where Tannenbaum first found that original egg. However, Egg Mountain now colloquially refers to the area as a whole, so keep that in mind. The proper name for Egg Mountain that it's called by geologists is the Willow Creek Acticline. An acticline is a hill where layers of rock form an upside-down U-shape, typically seen around the formation of mountains. And around mountain formation this site indeed was. Egg Mountain and the Willow Creek Acticline are located just south of Chateau, Montana, which is located on the eastern base of the Rocky Mountains, as a part of the famous Two Medicine Formation. Back when Maiasaura lived, during the Upper Cretaceous around 80 to 75 million years ago, the Rockies were still fairly young, but rising rapidly. This happened thanks to the Pacific Plate, underneath the Pacific Ocean obviously, pushing under the North American Plate, causing it to sort of ruffle and fold similar to a tablecloth or a rug. And that is what formed the Rockies. This process also pushed down North America in the center, separating it into 2 halves, the eastern half being called Appalachia, the western half being called Laurasia. And this waterway in between we call the Western Interior Seaway. Egg Mountain would have been right between the young Rockies and the Western Interior Seaway. A little bit closer to the mountains, but it would still be considered pretty coastal. While today this environment is nothing but sand and rock, it's very dry, very deserty, during the Upper Cretaceous this site would have looked similar to a semi-arid brushland of modern East Africa or Australia. We know this due to nodular rocks found in the area called caliche, which form in semi-arid environments, as well as fossil tree stumps that show interrupted growth rings, which we also see in modern trees that live in semi-arid conditions. We also know this environment had experienced an annual monsoon season, thanks to oxygen isotopes found trapped within the sedimentary rock, which I think it's just awesome that we can see that. This area would have been teeming with animals of all kinds. Egg Mountain was home to a relative of modern iguanas called Magnuviator ovimonsensis, which ate all sorts of insects native to the area. Egg Mountain was also the home of some early mammals, like the marsupial relative Alphodon halei, or the multi-tuberculate Semixomys judithae. The area was also, of course, home to multiple species of dinosaurs, like the small heterodontosaurid or Dromaeus mckellii, as well as theropods like the Spletosaurus horneri and Trodon formosus. But most obviously, this area was the nesting ground for the large hadrosaurid Maiasaura peoplesorum, the star of today's video, of course. Maiasaura were large herding animals, as evidenced by the countless individuals found throughout Egg Mountain's bone beds. Nests from these animals have been preserved in multiple horizons or layers of the Willow Creek Acticline, which implies that these animals returned here probably annually in order to mate and lay eggs in massive nesting colonies. We see this today in countless species of birds, so it's not too far out of the question for these massive dinosaurs. It's also been noted that nests of the same layer or horizons are typically an average of 23 feet apart, or around 7 meters apart. Which, makes a lot of sense since an adult Maiasaura would have also been around that length. It would have been a little bit of a tight squeeze, but it seems to have worked, as we have discovered over 200 individuals from Egg Mountain, showing that these animals were highly successful. In fact, I have a specimen here. It's very cool. It is part of the caudal vertebrae of a Maiasaura. I think it's really cool. Hold it up, bring it to the camera. Look at that. It's a little bone. Part of these animals' success can likely be traced back to the Maiasaura's namesake trait, their parental behavior. Maiasaura translates to good mother lizard, which is super fitting based upon the discoveries originally made in the 70s. The baby Maiasaura that Brandvold and Horner and gang had uncovered showed that these animals, when first hatched, were super weak and unable to take care of themselves. Their limb bones and spine were not yet fully fused, and the ends of their limb bones were still made up of very spongy bone. And this is just like we see in modern juvenile animals like birds. Intriguingly, however, the jaws and teeth of these small dinosaurs already showed evidence of wear and tear, which means that these baby animals had already been eating. This means that parent Maiasaura would have been feeding their young. There's also evidence that Maiasaura were taking care of their young before they even left the eggs. Maiasaura would have placed rotting vegetation in the bottom of their nests in order to keep the eggs warm and incubating, since obviously an animal that could weigh upwards of 4,500 pounds couldn't really sit on their eggs. Now, was it necessarily the mother that took care of the babies? We don't really know, but for the purpose of this video, we're going to stick with Maiasaura being a good mother. After first hatching, these baby hadrosaurs would have grew up quickly, similar to the growth rate of modern birds or even modern mammals like elk. These babies were likely able to leave the nest at just around a month or two old, and reached up to 4 feet long or more by the time they reached a year old. While these babies grew rapidly, that does not mean they had an easy year of growing. Likely, these babies would have had to keep up with the migrating herd as soon as they were able to leave the nest. And if they couldn't keep up, they would most likely have been left behind to die. In fact, the recorded mortality rate of Maiasaura under a year old has been found to be almost 90%. If they survived that first year, however, these animals thrived very successfully for roughly the next 7 to 8 years, growing to over 4,000 pounds and reaching over 20 feet long. Also, depending on what sex the individual was, they could have gone even larger. It's been proven that these hadrosaurs were sexually dimorphic when it comes to their size, with one sex being on average around 45% larger than the other one when fully grown. However, we don't really know which sex was the larger one, so this is really kind of a useless point to make. These animals likely reached sexual maturity at around 3 years old, then went on to thrive until reaching senior citizen status at around 8. From here, their mortality rate again rises to roughly 44%. But we do have evidence of some individuals making it up to 9 years old. Now, you may be saying to yourself, Connor, you're a real whack job, because how the hell can you tell the age of a dinosaur who died tens of millions of years ago? Are you insane? And to answer that second question, yes. But to answer the first question, I'll explain it right now, just give me a minute. You see, animal bones, especially long limb bones like the femur or the tibia, are very similar to trees. You probably think I'm even more insane now, but I promise I'm making a point. Give me a minute. These bones, sort of like a tree, grow a sort of ring every year the organism is alive. So, if we take a slice out of the limb bone of an extinct animal, we can count the number of rings in order to see how old the animal was when it died, just like we can see how old a tree was when it got cut down. Looking for the microstructures of bones in extinct animals in order to tell the ontogeny of a species is known as histology, and Maiasaura just so happens to be the best case of histology throughout the fossil record. The study I'm referring to about this is from 2015 by Holly Woodward et al., and it was only possible due to the fact we have so many individual specimens of Maiasaura preserved at Egg Mountain. The study is really interesting, so if you want to check it out for yourself, the source will of course be in the credits, just like all of my references typically are. However, this study is again only possible thanks to the massive bone beds of Maiasaura that are preserved in Egg Mountain. A majority of the Maiasaura specimens we have found have been preserved in their original positions that the animal died in, which we call in situ. And perhaps a little horrific, a majority of these Maiasaura come from the exact same layer or horizon of rock. This massive herd of Maiasaura, which likely came here for a nesting season, likely all met the same fate at the exact same time. Now, it's not 100% confirmed they all died at the same time. There's a litany of things that could have happened for them all to end up in the same layer. We gotta have a little bit of nuance. However, there are a couple theories as to what could have killed these hadrosaurs all at the same time if it was a single event. Firstly, it's possible that the environment itself killed these hadrosaurs. This area, being a semi-arid environment, would have likely experienced an occasional drought, which would have led to the animals not being able to drink and therefore dying. Another theory is that this herd could have been wiped out by some sort of disease. However, there is one theory or option that I'm personally leaning towards being the true killer of these Maiasaura. As stated before, Egg Mountain is located at the base of what at the time was the newly forming Rocky Mountains. And while I'm not a geologist by any means, I do happen to know that when there's massive geological activity, very often volcanoes follow. Now, is all this just based upon me understanding that? No, there's actual evidence, of course. I wouldn't be saying it if there was no evidence. We know at the base of the rising Rockies there would have been a massive volcanic field, roughly 100 miles or 161 kilometers wide, and 3 miles or 5-ish kilometers thick. And we now call this the Elkhorn Mountain Volcanics. Knowing that there's a volcano there and there was volcanic activity there isn't the only reason I believe this, though. The thing that makes me side with this theory is that a majority of the Maiasaura specimens found, from the bone beds to the nesting sites, were all within the same layer of a type of clay known as bentonite. And bentonite is formed from falling volcanic ash. Now, does that mean 100% that a volcanic event killed these Maiasaura? No. Again, they might not have even died at the same time. However, in my mind, that makes the most logical sense as to what happened. Either way, however, it's abundantly clear that these animals are no longer with us. And as far as I can find, we don't really see Maiasaura outside of Egg Mountain after this event. These animals died. Their babies died. That's kind of the downside of finding fossils of juvenile animals. Sure, it's awesome to see and study the ontogeny and growth and lives of these amazing animals. But at the same time, it's incredibly sad when you take a step back and think about these animals being literal babies, potentially fearing for their lives while being covered by scorching hot volcanic ash. And then it's especially more sad to think about the potentially hundreds of animals that would have lost their lives at that exact same time. However, the story of Maiasaura is of course not just one of death and grief. These animals are in fact one of the most important paleontological finds of the last century, in my opinion. These animals proved to the world once and for all that dinosaurs were not just mindless killing machines or dumb, sluggish reptiles, but rather intelligent, caring, and living animals. The first time the public really got to see this side of dinosaurs was in the 1985 book for kids entitled Maya, a Dinosaur Grows Up. This book, authored by none other than Jack Horner as well as James Gorman and Jerry D., was one of the first times the public saw dinosaurs as the animals they truly were. Thanks to the illustrations of artist Doug Henderson, people like you and I likely saw for the first time dinosaurs in the horizontal, non-tail-dragging position that we know today. And as the title of the book suggests, this book showcased the parental nature of the Maiasaura. The public also got one of their first glimpses into the true nature of these hadrosaurs that same year in the CBS documentary simply called Dinosaur. I have to say it like that because there's an exclamation point. Which showed the CT scans of a Maiasaura embryo within its egg. From there, the rest is literally history. We now understand dinosaurs more than ever, but more importantly, dinosaurs are one of the most important segues for all people and children into science. And this is all thanks to the likes of Maiasaura during the infamous dinosaur renaissance. Sadly, in 2014, the original discoverer of Maiasaura, Marion Brandvold, passed away at 102. However, the legacy she and her family have left behind is nothing short of incredible. Her son, David Trexler, in 1995, founded the Montana Dinosaur Center in Bynum, Montana, the same place where his mother found those small bones and placed them into her shop back in the 70s. This center is now the home of those original bones, following a pretty grueling legal battle with Princeton and Yale, who ended up giving them back to the original discoverers back in the 2000s. As for Egg Mountain, which is technically now called the Museum of the Rockies Beatrice R. Taylor Paleontology Research Site, but let's be so real, we're still calling it Egg Mountain. It was bought by the Museum of the Rockies back in 2004, and if I remember correctly, the site is now mostly open for the public to see. And with all that said, for now, the story of Maiasaura, the good mother lizard, comes to a close. And this video comes to its end. I hope you learned something from this video because I know I have while making the video. If you did learn something from this video, or if you just enjoyed the video in general, I would appreciate it if you left a like, which not only tells me to make more videos like this, but also pushes the video into the algorithm so someone else can learn rather than being subjected to fear-mongering or slop content. As always, if you want to get to know me a little bit more, you can check out my socials or join the Discord, all linked in the description below. And finally, if you like paleontology and dinosaurs, feel free to subscribe for more. I'll see you next time, and happy Mother's Day. Whew. Awesome. Another video done, guys. High five. Yeah, I want to do this with every video now. Create a little bit of, like, a set, but then it requires me buying things. Half the time I don't have any of the species I'm talking about. Alright, now we gotta do the tradition. Checking the word count. Alright, I just checked. The entirety of the script is 3,500 words. Not too bad. Not too shabby. I hope you can see this throughout the video. It's really cool. It is the part of the caudal vertebrae of Maiasaura, straight from Egg Mountain. And I don't know, it's just really cool in my opinion. And it's a good example of just the abundance of Maiasaura fossils there, because I don't really buy fossils if they're scientifically important. So if we have a bunch of them that aren't really significant, I'll buy a fossil like that. But if it's something like, I don't know, a species that we only have 2 specimens of, I'm not going to buy something like that. So that's just a sign of how many Maiasaura specimens we truly have, thanks to Egg Mountain's preservation. Also, Mattel's Maiasaura from the reader's line, mine came in a little messed up. It has a little bit of a bent arm there. Also, funnily enough, Mattel, what happened? Why does the Maiasaura have 4 toes? Why? That's not how the hadrosaurs worked. Anyways, credits are probably over, so I'm gonna go away. You're on an end screen! You can click this video to go watch it. I promise you it's actually really fun. Hopefully. I'd hope. Or you can subscribe to the channel by pressing this button. If you subscribed, that would be really appreciated. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye. You can go now.